Hello everybody, my name is Mario5514 and welcome back to another Splatoon Talk video. In this video we're going to be looking back at some of the previous updates in Splatoon 3's history as of version 11.2. With the next update coming out or being confirmed, we're going to be looking back to see how much the game has changed since 2022. If you end up enjoying the video, hit the like button, and if you end up liking the video, consider subscribing, and let's get started as we jump into version 11.1, which dropped on March 19th, 2026. And honestly, this update is kind of a disappointment, and I'll tell you why in a bit. And here are the notes that Nintendo has given us. This update focused on making changes to matchmaking and multiplayer balance. For X battles, we have changed the systems for matchmaking and team division. First of all, rather than simply gathering players with similar X powers at that point in time, we have made it so that it will instead gather players whose final X power will likely become similar after accumulating matches. With this change, extreme matches will be less likely, even immediately after the start of the season or immediately after finishing calculation, which in that case, if you're playing X battles for the first time in the season, you basically have to play through 5 matches to get your total X power after the calculations, which is an estimation, before it starts to be determined with 3 matches if you win or lose them. Also, when matchmaking is taking a long time, it will gradually soften the criteria for determining a similar level of ability, but we have changed these criteria in the system for team division to ensure that the level of ability of players on both teams will be symmetrical, even in time zones and regions with fewer players. Additionally, we have changed the pairing system for the weapons that players may battle against. Up until now, weapons have been divided into several groups, and the system more frequently paired weapons belonging to the same group for battles. We have changed the system to make it so that players more frequently battle with weapons of similar preferred ranges, regardless of group, in order to reduce the likelihood of a player's weapon always being pitted against weapons with a longer or shorter preferred range. As for multiplayer balance, we made changes based on the battle data from version 11.0. Among the weapons that were upgraded in version 11.0 or were greatly affected by changes to the battle system, we made changes to slightly reduce the performance of some weapons that the battle data showed have become highly impactful. For some of the weapons that did not receive much benefit from the battle system changes, we have made changes to slightly raise their performance and make them easier to wield. The next update will focus on changes to the balance of battles. Nintendo. Alright, with that being said, let's see what they've given us here. And we jump straight into the patch notes. First up is the Splatter Shot Nova. Increase the speed of shots by approximately 25% without changing the flight distance. So this is a nice change here, considering the fact the last buff it was given was back in 10.1. Besides the hitbox changes from the last update, this is a decent buff for Nova. I do think it needs more than just this, but it's a step in the right direction. Very solid buff, we'll take it. Flings a Roller. Adjust the damage fall-off rate based on distance for vertical swings, allowing them to deal 50 and 100 damage farther than they did before. So basically its kill range for both its 50 damage and 100 damage or more has been extended. So you're going to be able to switch from painting to fighting a little bit more easier, and 9 out of 10 times you're going to be using the vertical flick when you're using Flings a Roller, as its horizontal can be inconsistent. And it's been since 6.1 that Flingza has been given a buff besides the hitbox changes. So it is nice that Flingza is getting this buff in this regard. I do think it needs a little bit more, but still, it's a step in the right direction. We'll take it. Octobrush. Reduce the amount of ink consumed when swinging the brush by approximately 10%. So originally its ink consumption was about 3%. This will reduce it down to 2.7. So this by far is a huge buff to the regular model, given that it has Zipcaster, and Zipcaster is ink hungry. So this will help it out a bit. And of course, with it being 10% less ink hungry, it does allow you to use your subs a little bit more, given that Octobrush currently has Suction Bomb, Squid Beacon, and Auto Bomb, which are decent subs here. So it's a decent buff. I do think Octobrush could have been given a different buff besides this, like, I don't know, faster movement speed when sliding. I think that would have been nice since it's slower than Paintbrush and Inkbrush. But still, it's a decent buff. We'll take it. Bamboo. Increase movement speed while charging or firing by approximately 13%. This is the first time since 2.1 that Bamboo has been given a buff. And its strafe speed is 13% faster. And yeah, I do think Bamboo has been lacking things since its last buff in 2.1. People could technically say that 6.1 was the last one, but that was when it got minus 10 points for special for Whale, as well as Bamboo Mach 2 got it in 10.1 when it was made 190p for Super Chump. So it is a decent buff for it. I do think it needs more than this, but it's a step in the right direction, so we'll take it. Blablabber, increased damage from 30 to 32. So its DPS is going to be slightly higher, and its object damage is going to be slightly higher. So this is a decent buff, but considering the fact that Blob's playstyle is a bit passive, I don't think it's a healthy playstyle, but I do think it's something that Nintendo could be looking at a bit more, since the last buff it was given was back in 4.1. So it is nice that they're looking at the weapon, but I do think its playstyle can be changed. Very solid buff, we'll take it. Dowser Dualies. Reduce the time between doing a dodge roll and being able to take another action by approximately 1/30th of a second. If this looks familiar, this is the same buff we gave it back in 9.2. Yeah. Where we reduced it by 3 frames, from 45 to 42 frames. This time we're reducing it from 42 to 40 frames. I think this buff is kind of like unnecessary. I think Dowser's needed more than just this, like make it standard fire paint more. So I guess this is a nice buff here, but I mean, giving it a paint buff would be even better. But still, it's a decent buff. We'll take it. Tent Umbrella. Reduce the amount of ink consumed by launching the canopy by approximately 23%. This is the first time since Splatoon 2 that Tent Umbrella has been given a buff. And I think this is a solid one. So its ink consumption when launching the canopy was originally 30%. This will reduce it down to 23%. So this will give Tent Umbrella players a little bit of an easier time to use its sub, which you could use Squid Beacon, Ink Mine, or Toxic Mist. So it is a decent buff here. I do think Tent needs more than just this, but it's a step in the right direction. We'll take it. Dynamo Roller. Lessen the effects of the ink consumption reduction when equipping the Ink Saver main ability. So what this means is that Ink Saver main is made more costly, or it's been weakened on Dynamo Roller. So originally, Ink Saver main's effectiveness was about 50%. This will reduce it down to 45%, matching that of most of the other weapons currently. And the maximum stacking slope was originally 60%. This will reduce it down to 50%. This nerf was intended to break 7-flick Dynamo builds. So you're now going to be running like the 6-flick build, which requires about a main and 2 subs of Ink Saver main with last-ditch effort. So from what I've heard, Dynamo Roller has an intended weakness of being very ink hungry to compensate or as a trade-off for having very powerful flicks in terms of its horizontal and vertical flick. So this was to make sure that its weakness stays intact, which I think is a good change. No sub-weapons. Specials. Ultra Stamp. Decrease the radius of the 220 damage area of the explosion at the point of impact when throwing the stamp by approximately 10%. So originally, its 220 hitbox when throwing the special was 4 units. This reduced it down to 3.6. So, yeah. Ultra Stamp's throw mode is going to be a little bit more fair. I do think the 220 hitbox is still a bit big, though it is going to be toned back to where you still have to throw it. You have to aim it a little bit more. So you just can't throw it aimlessly and hope that the 220 is going to do its job. So you're going to have to aim it a little bit more, which is nice. Considering the fact it's this is kind of like a slight tone back from what it was given in 9.3. And points for special changes, there's a whole lot of them. There's only 1 points for special buff, and the rest of them are nerfs. Splatter Shot will get Trizuka at 200. I think this is a nice change. I think 210 was definitely overkill, so I think 200 is reasonable. So Splatter Shot will be in a position where it's not going to be spamming Zuka, and it won't be in a position where it's going to have a rough time getting it. So it's in a decent spot, despite Trizuka being inconsistent. Sploosh will get Ultra Stamp at 190. Splash will get Crab Tank at 210. It took us almost 4 years for that to happen, and it finally did. Neo Luna Blaster will get Ultra Stamp in 190, which is okay. Blaster will get Big Bubbler at 190. Custom Blaster will get Triple Splashdown at 190. Rapid Blaster Pro Deco will get Whale at 200. Dynamo Roller will get Tacticooler at 200, which was kind of relevant given the fact that this weapon can get it in less than 5 flicks. Now it will take at least 5 to get the cooler. Ink Brush Nouveau will get Stamp at 190. Heavy Splatling will get Wavebreaker at 210, considering the fact we still see this weapon a lot in X battles. Dapple Dualies will get Tacticooler at 180, and Splat Dualies for some reason will get Crab Tank at 200. So from what I'm seeing, it's most likely just toning back special spam on these. However, the only reason why Blaster and Custom Blaster are getting plus 10 points for special is because that's Nintendo's way of trying to tone it back when its blast radius is just broken. The reason why I say that is because in version 11.0, blasters got two changes. Alongside the hitbox changes, they also got a blast radius buff to compensate. So, following is the list of the blast radius sizes for all of the blasters. This will be for the 50 and 70 damage radius. For blaster, its 50 damage radius was at 3.47 units from 3.3. 70 damage radius is at 1.11 units. For range blaster, its blast radius was at 3.3, which was increased to 3.37. 70 damage radius was increased from 0.94 to 1.01. Luna Blaster went from 3.8 units to 4 units, bringing back to what it had in Splatoon 1, with its 70 damage radius going from 1.6 to 1.8 units. For Rapid Blaster, it went from 3.3 to 3.37 units, matching that of Range Blaster. For Rapid Pro, it went from 3.3 to 3.35 units, which is a decent change. Clash Blaster went from 4 units to 4.17, almost 4.2 units. And S-Blast, this is only for its jump AoE, 50 damage radius went from 4 units to 3.72, considering the fact the hitbox changes kind of slightly made the 11% blast radius nerf that I got in 11.0 not as effective, as it was only nerfed by 7% due to the hitbox changes. And the 70 damage radius would be about 1.06 units. So yeah, blaster AoE in this game is still broken, and regular blaster is considered top tier. So yeah, we're starting to see the weapon a lot more, but it won't be until the next update that Nintendo is going to try to fix things. And yeah, and changes to X battles, as mentioned from earlier. Change the system for matchmaking so that rather than having players with similar X power at the time battle each other, now players whose final X power will likely become similar after accumulating matches will be paired for battles. Change the systems for matchmaking and team division to make it less likely to result in skill disparity between teams, even in time zones and regions where there are not many players. In the 10 attack division, players with X power less than 2,000 and players with X power of 2,000 or higher may now be matched together. So there was a change that the X battle system was given back in like 6.0, where they divided the players who were less than and above more than 2,000 XP. They got rid of that barrier in the 10 attack division. So Takaroka is the only one that has this, but the 10 attack division no longer has that 2,000 XP barrier. So yeah, they can now be matched together. And change the matchmaking system to allow battles against more different weapons than before. So this is to try to increase, try to make comps less strict. So that's what they're trying to do for X battles. So these are some nice quality of life changes for X battles, but I do think it needs a little bit more than this, but they're almost there. And that's it. That is 11.1. If you guys like the video, be sure you subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. The next update will change things in a completely different way. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.